Lee, a police officer, is bleeding on the ground in the middle of the street while recalling flashbacks from his earlier days. There's a fuzzy memory of a woman sitting in front of him, but the rest of his memories are clear. Lee reveals that he has been bullied a lot for his ability to see ghosts since he was a little child. This started around 30 minutes ago. Lee and his friend David are keeping watch over a blocked road. David believes Lee would have a better life and make more money if he used his powers as a medium instead of a cop, especially because he is constantly getting in problems on the job, such as when he pulled a ghost out of the way of a car. When David gets off the road to rest himself, Lee becomes diverted, and a car passes him, prompting him to run in his own car to stop it. The driver, Billy, apologizes and says that he is in a rush since he hasn't seen his family in weeks, persuading Lee to let him go without paying a penalty. But on his way back, Lee sees that the taillights are turned off, and when he opens the trunk, he discovers a bloodied wallet. But before he can do anything, Billy comes next to him and punches him, knocking him to the ground. As David arrives and attempts to take the man into custody, Billy snatches his gun and shoots him. He also shoots Lee in the shoulder, but just as he is about to shoot him once more to put an end to the conflict, the spirit of his victim appears. As Lily appears to slow him down, Lee has the opportunity to pull his own gun, shoot Billy, and taking us back to the beginning of the film. The last thing Lee remembers before passing out is the ghost pointing at the bleeding wallet. A few days later, Lee receives praise from his superiors for apprehending a wanted felon. But the higher-ups are unhappy with the section of the statement that claims he was assisted by a ghost, and they believe Lee's illusions are to blame for David's death. Lee refuses to remove that section of the story because he does not want to lie about it and is dismissed as a result. Lee doesn't know what to do with his life now. Fortunately, he is approached by Mr. Johnson, the chief of a secret police unit reached by an elevator that everyone assumes is dysfunctional. Mr. Johnson noticed Lee as he pulled a ghost out of the path of a car and was moved by the young man's respect for the spirit who had rescued him. Therefore, he had the ideal job for him. After Mr. Johnson presses 2 elevator buttons to access a secret floor, Lee arrives at the 9th Precinct, a special unit in charge of dealing with ghosts that still wander the earth after dying. Lee is perplexed about how he can assist the spirits since he can see them but not hear them, but Mr. Johnson assures him that he will eventually learn to hear them. At that time, David's ghost appears, and Lee apologizes to him, pledging to burn a paper doll in his honor before seeing the spirit go for the afterlife. The next person Lee encounters is Natasha, a skilled medium who frequently drinks excessively to cope with being possessed by spirits. As a new mission comes, their introduction is cut short, so Mr. Johnson demonstrates Lee the instruments of their trade. The Peachwood umbrella has spells on it to ward off evil spirits and shield good spirits. Like a telephone, the incense burner enables them to communicate with the ghosts. Also, the guns in this place don't fire regular bullets. Instead, they are armed with sacred water that has the power to drive away evil spirits. Nevertheless, this water may only be used against ghosts that are beyond recovery. There aren't any regular badges either. Instead, Mr. Johnson wears a ring around his neck as the emblem of the 9th Precinct, and Lee will have to put in a lot of work to get his own. The first case is a haunted city house. A young woman's radio continues going on by itself, and the cabinet door frequently opens by itself as well, spilling candies to the ground. She sees the ghost of a child appear around the house at night, and while she initially blames it on terrible nightmares, she ultimately accepts it as fact when she wakes up one morning and finds the child hugging her. After hearing her statement, Mr. Johnson and Lee urge the home inhabitants to leave so they may do their investigation. Lee rushes to the cupboard, and when he opens the umbrella, the kid's spirit appears next to him. Mr. Johnson grabs a piece of candy and places it next to the incense so that he may talk to the kid and comprehend his situation by doing so. The boy's spirit is now imprisoned here, yearning for his mother to come back, because it turns out that his parents didn't carry out the ritual after the boy's death. The spirit had no intention of frightening the woman. Instead, he had been yearning for a mother's love and care. Mr. Johnson assures the boy that he will see his mother again before using the umbrella to trap him inside like a Pokémon. They may then take the child to the office to get support as they help him move on. Meanwhile, at Sun General Hospital, Dean Rubai is rehearsing a sales pitch for her rejuvenation therapy when her secretary stops her to alert her that Counselor Lin has been gravely injured in a car accident. Because maintaining good ties with politicians is crucial, Rubai instructs her secretary to treat Lin in turn. She also cautions him against hiring another worthless thug like Billy in the future or he would suffer the consequences. As Mr. Johnson and Lee enter the office again, Natasha alerts Lee to the presence of a female ghost who is stalking him but is keeping her presence to herself. Mr. Johnson prohibits Lee from becoming involved. Apprehending criminals is the responsibility of the regular police. The 9th Precinct exclusively deals with ghosts. Lee wonders whether it's the ghost of the woman he assisted asking him to solve her case. Lee makes the decision to disobey Mr. Johnson's instructions and head back to the road where they arrested Billy because he is still troubled by the foggy memory of a woman. He runs into Lily's ghost, and after burning the incense, thanks her for her help and shows her that he still has her wallet. Lily confirms her request for help with a nod, and Lee accepts her case. A little while later, Lee enters the apartment Lily had brought him to. Because he is distracted, he does not hear someone approaching and is knocked unconscious when a pan hits him on the head. As Lee awakens chained to the chair, he sees the apartment's owner, journalist Dolly. Lee proves his story by showing her Lily's ID and then pointing to a box that Lily was also pointing at. Inside, Dolly discovers Lily's notebook, which has a photograph of the two of them. Now that Dolly is convinced Lee can see Lily, Lee agrees to work with her when Dolly says that Lily has been gone for more than a month and that she needs help figuring out what happened. The 9th Precinct's next case involves a house that constantly shakes its furnishings and makes strange noises. The elderly guy who has been hearing everything is the house's ghost. He is unaware that he is dead, and the voices he has been hearing are those of the new occupants. Now that the cops have arrived, the old guy approaches the shelves as if he needs something from them. Lee investigates and discovers a hidden chamber with a box within holding different objects once belonging to the ghost's daughter, such as a hair tie. They must locate the daughter in order to fulfill the elderly man's request and assist him in moving on. As soon as it happens, Natasha becomes possessed and has a vision of the countryside that shows where the daughter is. As they arrive, they discover that the area is packed with ghosts of young girls wearing the same gown, so Lee uses the hair tie to locate the girl they want. Then he opens the umbrella to free the elderly man's ghost, reuniting him with his loved one. Surprisingly, Lily's ghost is also present, dressed in the same gown as the others. Later, when the regular police arrive and begin excavating, they discover the bodies of all the ghosts, including Lily. The similar gowns obviously imply they were all murdered by the same person, and Lee wants to find them, but Mr. Johnson warns him not to get involved. To prove his argument, he tells the story of a 9th Precinct officer who attempted to become involved and had his wife killed in a car accident as a result, causing him to lose relationship with his daughter. Back at the hospital, Rubai is treating Counselor Lin in a secret chamber by submerging Billy's body in a pool. She also tells her secretary to find a replacement or else she'll use him. Meanwhile, Lee receives a phone call from Dolly, who heard about Lily's death and has been reading her diary. It turns out Lily had been pregnant, and Counselor Lin was the father. She had an appointment with Rubai for a checkup, but Lily vanished. After doing some research, Dolly learned that all of the victims had visited the Sun General Hospital, which explains for the similar gowns. Dolly and Lee decide to see Rubai, but when they bring up the victims' gowns, Rubai acts innocent and doesn't comprehend what they're saying. When it comes to Lily, Rubai admits she examined her as a favor to Counselor Lin, but that's it. Dolly is certain Rubai knows something, but without a warrant they are unable to act, so they choose to go. When they leave, Dolly notices the nearby security cameras and has an idea. She gets access to the camera video by bribing the security officer, where she finds a variety of fascinating information that she downloads onto a pen drive. Counselor Lin had no visible scars from the accident. Lily arrived at the hospital and never left, and Billy arrived shortly after. Rubai is also doing her own research. According to her secretary, Dolly's birth date is a perfect match for the treatment's requirements. Rubai, seeing her as a suitable sacrifice, summons an evil demon to capture Dolly. Returning to Lee, he accepts Juah for H-Sins to join her for a drink. When they're talking, he spills some wine on his pants, so he goes to the restroom to wash them. Then the lights go off and Rubai's evil spirit appears. Lee leaps into action, grabbing his revolver but leaving his pants behind as he struggles to deal with his fuzzy flashback growing clearer and revealing the ghost of a lady. As Lee manages to find the spirit, he attempts to shoot him, but the ghost moves too swiftly, and after a few spooks, it flees since it realizes he can't fight a cop. Suddenly, the apartment door opens, and Mr. Johnson shows up, not happy at seeing Lee in his underwear because Dolly is his daughter. Mr. Johnson tries to inquire as to what is happening, but Dolly forbids him from speaking anything since she doesn't get why he had to appear now, after not speaking to her for so long. Dolly ejects the two men because she wants some alone time. As soon as they get to the streets, Mr. Johnson shoots Lee with several holy water shots since he won't listen to his explanation. Later, at work, Mr. Johnson punches Lee for looking into things against his wishes and involving his daughter. Following Mr. Johnson's departure, Lee questions their decision to become police officers in the first place. Natasha reveals that Mr. Johnson is actually the police officer from the narrative who lost his wife. Thus, he wants to prevent his colleagues from making the same mistakes he did. Meanwhile, Mr. Johnson contacts Dolly to try to convince her to withdraw the lawsuit, but Dolly is still furious of him for leaving after her mother died. At that point, Natasha becomes possessed and writes disaster on a piece of paper while Dolly detects something odd on the surveillance footage. Ruby's shadow has horns. Before she can take action, Dolly is abducted by Ruby's secretary and two thugs. After hearing something strange on the phone, Mr. Johnson rushes to his daughter's apartment where he discovers all the evidence she has been gathering together with the paper dolls he gave her years before. Mr. Johnson makes the decision to break his own rules, enters the hospital, and after fighting the security guards, confronts Ruby. He offers to give her daughter back in return for the proof she's collected, but Ruby laughs as she reveals Mr. Johnson that Dolly would be the following victim sacrificed. She then captures Mr. Johnson with her dark magic and promises to make it appear as though he jumped to the roof on his own before sending him there. A few hours later, the police discover the corpse. The event becomes headline news. It appears Ruby faked certain documents, and now everyone thinks Mr. Johnson had been visiting the hospital for mental health issues for months. Everyone in the 9th precinct is in mourning, but Natasha, who tells Lee her story, was the one who was hurt the hardest. She grew raised with two father figures, the guy who adopted her and frequently beat her, and her original father, who passed away when she was 3. She eventually became tired of it and fled, but as she did so, she collapsed in the middle of the road. She later awoke at a temple where she resided until she was 18, and Mr. Johnson recruited her for the 9th precinct. At that point, she also discovered that Mr. Johnson had actually found her and taken her to the temple. Lee replies by telling his own tale. He had 2 moms since his father was advised by a fortune teller that he would have 2 wives, so he married Chia Ghost House mother to fulfill the prophecy. Even though Lee was the only one who could see her, he still had a fuzzy memories of her watching over him when he was ill. However, Lee was bullied by other children because of his special ability, and when he had had enough, he started ignoring his ghost mother until she disappeared. After that time, he has stopped hearing spirits. This is why Lee wishes to pursue justice for the spirits he meets now. Natasha finally realizes what it's like to want to help the ghosts, so he breaks the rules and joins up with him to bring Ruby down. They begin by ambushing the secretary in the hospital parking lot and kidnapped him to bring him to the office. The secretary won't talk because he believes Lee lacks the courage to shoot him, but because Natasha changed the gun's bullets, Lee accidentally shoots the man in the shoulder. Natasha then takes the gun and places it in the secretary's mouth, prompting him to speak. Ruby has been extending the life of herself and her politician friends by using women who shared the same birthday. The cure needs a ritual and a sacrifice, but the medium is crucial. Lee wears one of Mr. Johnson's paper dolls around his neck as a lucky charm. Natasha and Lee are both heavily equipped. Then they drive to the hospital and easily beat up the guards before discovering the secret chamber with the altar and an unconscious Dolly. Ruby hears them and pauses her prayers to the devil, causing Lee to flee behind a statue and Natasha to hide behind a door that mistakenly shuts behind her. Natasha is now surrounded by spirits, which she fights with her sacred weapons. It's a swift and tidy fight. But after all the spirits have been exorcised, one more appears, Natasha's abusive father. Natasha, who is terrified, takes a step back and shuts her eyes to focus while telling herself that she is no longer a child. Meanwhile, Lee and Ruby continue to shoot at each other, but Lee's bullets never hit because Ruby is protected by a magical shield. When Ruby throws Mr. Johnson's ring at him, taunting him, Lee gets an idea. He sets down his weapons and walks over to Ruby while holding up his hands in an act of surrender. When he's close enough, he spits the holy water bullets he's been holding in his mouth at the same moment at her. Natasha quickly sips her drink before spitting at her father's spirit in an effort to extinguish him forever. Lee is pushed back by Ruby by shooting his shoulder, but it's too late because her body is now showing her true age. As Natasha stated, the medium is the most crucial aspect of the ritual, and the dark forces around Dolly vanish. Ruby uses the little energy she has left to shoot Lee again, but Mr. Johnson's ghost arrives to distract her, and Ruby dies. He mentions that this is the second time he saved Lee's life because the bullet was guided to his shoulder by his amulet. Also, a very unique change is taking place. Lee may now hear ghosts once more. While Natasha finally gets the door open, Mr. Johnson takes out Dolly from the ritual pool and talks to her until she wakes up. Unfortunately, she is unable to see her father.